The war room of the Galactic Coalition's main headquarters buzzed with quiet desperation. Ambassador Xerxes, a tall reptilian being with scales that shifted from blue to purple when stressed, stood before the massive holographic display showing the current state of the conflict. Red zones spread across the galaxy like a disease, marking territories lost to the Void Swarm. The Coalition had been fighting for 3 years, and they were losing badly. "Another system has fallen," reported General Vorthok, his 6 arms moving nervously as he updated the tactical display. "The Kepler sector is completely overrun. We estimate another 2 billion civilian casualties." Every species present had lost entire worlds to the swarm. Creatures that seemed to feed on destruction itself. Xerxes' communication device suddenly chirped with an incoming message from the Outer Rim. The signal was crude, transmitted on primitive frequencies that most civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. The translator struggled with the language, producing choppy, broken sentences that made little sense. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force." The message began, "We have been monitoring your conflict. Our planet offers military assistance to your coalition." The ambassador's scales flickered with confusion. Earth was not in any of their databases. No species from that sector had ever made contact with the coalition. "Run a scan on their transmission source," Xerxes ordered. The technicians worked quickly, their multiple eyes blinking in concentration. Out. Within minutes, the results appeared on the main screen. The readout made several delegates gasp in shock. "The transmission originates from a planet with gravity 1.4 times Coalition standard," reported the chief scientist. "Atmospheric composition includes 21% oxygen, which is toxic to most species. Surface radiation levels are 300% above safety limits. Temperature variations range from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius." The scientist paused, checking the readings again. "Ambassador, these conditions would kill most Coalition species within hours." Xerxes stared at the data in disbelief. "You're telling me that intelligent life evolved on a death world? Before anyone could answer, another message arrived from the humans. This time they had included visual communication. The screen flickered, and suddenly the Coalition delegates were looking at a creature unlike anything in their databases. Captain Jake Morrison stood just over 6 feet tall, with pale skin, brown hair, and 2 forward-facing eyes that seemed to track everything at once. He wore a simple military uniform made from what appeared to be woven plant fibers. Most disturbing of all, he seemed completely comfortable in conditions that would require full environmental suits for any Coalition species. "Greetings, Coalition leaders," Morrison said in a calm, steady voice. "I am Captain Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Defense Force. We have been observing your war against the Void Swarm. Through our deep space monitoring stations, we would like to offer our assistance." General Vorthok leaned forward, his translator working hard to process the human's words. "Captain Morrison, our scans indicate that your world is extremely hostile. How did your species develop space travel? Under such conditions?" Morrison's face showed what the Coalition would later learn was called a smile. "Our world taught us to be tough. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years, so fighting aliens is not much different. We have weapons and soldiers ready to help." Dr. Lisa Bennett, Earth's chief scientist, stepped into view beside Morrison. She was smaller than the captain, with dark skin and hair tied back in a practical style. In her hands, she held a device that beeped softly. "Captain, the radiation levels on their ships are barely registering. These beings require much safer environments than we do." The Coalition delegates exchanged worried glances. The humans spoke of radiation and hostile conditions as if they were minor inconveniences. Admiral Vorthok activated his personal force field, a precaution against the primitive transmission that might carry unknown contaminants. "Captain Morrison," Xerxes said carefully, "our medical teams would need to examine your species before any military cooperation could begin. We must ensure that contact is safe for both our peoples." Morrison nodded. "Of course, Dr. Bennett has prepared a full biological and medical report on our species. I should warn you, some of our capabilities might seem unusual to your people." Data package arrived within minutes, and the Coalition's best scientists began analyzing human physiology. The results were more disturbing than anyone had expected. Humans could survive in environments that would instantly kill most Coalition species. Their immune systems could fight off diseases that would wipe out entire populations. Their bones were dense enough to withstand impacts that would shatter delicate alien skeletons. But it was their psychological profile that truly shocked the Coalition. Dr. Bennett's report contained sections on human warfare, showing that these beings had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting not just their environment, but each other. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet, engaged in conflicts that lasted for decades, and seemed to view violence as a natural solution to problems. "These humans," whispered one delegate, "they are not just survivors. They are predators." Morrison continued his presentation, unaware of the growing alarm in the Coalition war room. "Our military forces are organized into different branches. We have ground troops who specialize in close combat, naval forces for water operations, air forces for atmospheric flight, and space forces for operations beyond our planet. Each branch is trained extensively in combat against various enemies." Captain gestured to someone off-screen, and another human appeared. This one was younger, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. She wore combat armor that looked crude but functional. "This is Lieutenant Amy Foster. She leads one of our special operations teams." Foster stepped forward and saluted. "Our team has experience in hostile environment operations. We can function in temperatures from -42 plus 50 degrees Celsius, survive in low oxygen environments, and operate in radiation levels that would be dangerous to most life forms." The Coalition delegates stared in horror. These humans spoke of conditions that would require full environmental suits and constant medical monitoring, as if they were normal working conditions. Admiral Vorthok quickly ran calculations on his personal computer. A human soldier could operate in environments where Coalition forces would need heavy protective equipment that would slow them down and limit their effectiveness. Dr. Bennett continued the presentation with medical data. "Human soldiers can continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most other species. Our bones can heal from fractures, our skin can regenerate from cuts and burns, and our cardiovascular system can continue functioning even with significant damage. We also have high pain tolerance and can maintain combat effectiveness under extreme stress." Xerxkai felt his scales turning deep purple, a sign of extreme stress. "Dr. Bennett, you are describing capabilities that seem almost impossible. How do your people survive childhood with such dangerous conditions?" Morrison's smile grew wider. "Our children play games that would be considered military training by most species. They learn to compete, to push their limits, and to recover from injuries that would hospitalize adults from other worlds. By the time they reach military age, they are already tougher than most Coalition soldiers." The presentation continued for another hour, with the humans calmly describing their military capabilities. They had weapons that used chemical explosives, projectile weapons that fired metal bullets at high velocity, and energy weapons that could function in environments where Coalition technology would fail. Their soldiers trained in conditions that would kill most Coalition species, and they seemed to enjoy the challenge of combat. When the transmission ended, the Coalition war room sat in stunned silence. They had been fighting the Void Swarm for 3 years with advanced technology and careful tactics, losing ground every day. These humans offered something different, raw, violent effectiveness that came from evolving on a world that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. "What do we do?" asked General Vorthok, his 6 arms trembling slightly. Ambassador Xerxkai looked at the tactical display where more red zones appeared every hour. The Coalition was losing the war, and conventional tactics had failed. These humans might be dangerous, but they were also exactly what the Coalition needed. "Send them coordinates for a meeting?" Xerxkai decided. "If we are going to survive this war, we need allies who can fight in conditions where we cannot. These humans may be our only hope." The message was sent, and within days, human ships began arriving at Coalition space stations. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when a species evolved on a death world decided to go to war. The The Coalition's medical facility on Space Station Game 7 had never seen anything like the human delegation. Dr. Kethmore, station's chief medical officer, watched nervously as the humans walked through the docking bay without any protective equipment. The atmospheric readings showed conditions that would require full environmental suits for any Coalition species. Yet the humans seemed perfectly comfortable. Captain Jake Morrison led the group, followed by Dr. Lisa Bennett and a squad of human soldiers. Behind them walked Commander Ryan Hayes, a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes, who carried himself with the confidence of someone used to dangerous situations. The Coalition medical team had prepared isolation chambers and decontamination protocols, but the humans walked right past them. Dr. Kethmore, Morrison said, extending his hand in what the Coalition would learn was a human greeting gesture. Thank you for agreeing to examine our people. We understand you need to know more about our biology before we can work together. Dr. Kethmore activated his translation device and approached cautiously. The human's hand was warm, much warmer than any Coalition species, and the grip was firm enough to crush the delicate bones of most aliens. Captain Morrison, we have prepared comprehensive medical examinations. However, we must warn you that some of our procedures may be uncomfortable. Morrison's face showed that strange expression called a smile. Doctor, we appreciate your concern, but I doubt your medical procedures are more uncomfortable than our basic training. Please, do whatever you need to do. The first shock came when the medical scanners began analyzing human physiology. Private Kate Williams, a young woman with red hair and green eyes, volunteered to be the first test subject. She lay on the examination table while the Coalition's most advanced medical equipment scanned her body. The results appeared on the main screen, and Dr. Kethmore's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. This cannot be correct, he muttered, running the scan again. The bone density readings are off the charts. Her skeletal structure could withstand impacts that would kill most Coalition species instantly. He looked at the human woman, who seemed bored by the whole process. Miss Williams, have you ever broken any bones? Kate nodded casually. Sure. Broke my arm twice as a kid, fractured my ribs during training, and cracked my skull in a sparring. Match last year, nothing serious. She said this as if she was discussing the weather, at injuries that would have been fatal to most other species. Dr. Kethmore's assistant, small insectoid being named Zixpack, ran additional scans on the human's cardiovascular system. Doctor, her heart rate is extremely slow, but the muscle density is incredible. This organ could pump blood through her body even with significant damage. And look at these lung capacity readings. She could survive in atmospheric conditions that would suffocate most of us. The medical team moved on to Sergeant Ben Parker, a muscular man with brown hair and numerous scars on his arms. When asked about the scars, Parker explained them with the same casual attitude as Williams. This one's from a knife fight during urban combat training. Its burn mark is from a chemical explosion during demolitions class. These small ones are from shrapnel during a live fire exercise. The Coalition medical team exchanged horrified glances. These humans spoke of injuries that would require months of recovery as if they were minor inconveniences. Dr. Kethmore began to understand that Earth was not just a difficult planet, it was a world that had forged its inhabitants into something that other species would consider impossible. Commander Hayes requested a meeting with the Coalition's military leadership. Admiral Vorthok and General Kextall arrived at the medical facility, their environmental suits making them look like walking machines compared to the casually dressed humans. Hayes stood before them without any protective equipment, breathing the station's artificial atmosphere as if it was perfectly normal. Gentlemen, Hayes began, I understand you want to know about our military capabilities. I brought some of our soldiers to demonstrate basic human combat training. He gestured to a group of Marines who had been waiting in the corridor. These are standard infantry troops, not our elite forces. The demonstration began in the station's training facility. The Coalition officers watched from behind protective barriers as the human soldiers began what they called basic exercises. Private Williams dropped to the floor and began performing push-ups, her body moving up and down with mechanical precision. The Coalition's physical fitness experts quickly calculated that she was lifting 60% of her body weight with each repetition. How many can she do? asked General Kexthal, his translator struggling with the concept. Williams usually does about 100 push-ups for warm-up, Hayes replied. After that, she'll do pull-ups, running, and weight training. This is just the beginning of her daily routine. The aliens watched in amazement as the human soldiers continued their exercises. Sergeant Parker lifted weights that would have crushed the bones of most coalition species. Another Marine, Corporal Lisa Martinez, ran on a treadmill at speeds that would have been impossible for most aliens to maintain for more than a few seconds. But it was the combat training that truly shocked the coalition observers. The humans paired off and began sparring, hitting each other with controlled strikes that would have been lethal to other species. They moved with speed and precision that seemed almost supernatural, their bodies absorbing impacts that should have caused serious injury. "Stop," shouted Dr. Kethmore, activating the emergency medical protocols. That soldier was just struck in the head with enough force to cause brain damage. The humans looked confused. The Marine who had been hit rubbed his jaw and grinned. "Doc, that was just a light tap. Ben was holding back because we're indoors. You should see what we do during real combat training." Hayes explained that human soldiers trained with live ammunition, explosive devices, and in environments that would be considered deadly by coalition standards. Our basic training takes place in deserts, jungles, Arctic conditions, and urban environments. We simulate combat situations where soldiers must continue fighting while injured, exhausted, and under extreme stress. Dr. Alex Turner, a human military psychologist, arrived to provide the coalition with additional information about human combat psychology. Turner was a quiet man with gray hair and calm eyes, but his report contained information that disturbed the alien observers even more than the physical demonstrations. "Humans are unusual among intelligent species," Turner explained. "Most civilized beings avoid conflict and seek peaceful solutions. Humans are different. We have evolved to not just survive combat, but to excel in it. We have psychological mechanisms that allow us to remain calm under extreme stress, make life or death decisions quickly, and continue fighting even when the odds are against us." Admiral Vorthok leaned forward in his environmental suit. "Dr. Turner, are you saying that humans enjoy combat?" Turner considered the question carefully. "Many humans find combat challenging and rewarding. We have competitive instincts that drive us to test ourselves against opponents. Our soldiers train not just to survive battles, but to win them. We study our enemies, adapt our tactics, and constantly improve our methods of warfare." The coalition officers began to understand why the humans had offered to help. This was not a desperate species seeking protection. These were apex predators who saw the void swarm as a challenge to be conquered. The very qualities that made other species avoid conflict made humans eager to engage in it. General Kextel accessed the coalition's military database and began comparing human capabilities to the void swarm's known tactics. The swarm creatures were nearly indestructible, could adapt to most weapons, and seemed to have no fear of death. But they had never encountered opponents who shared those same qualities. "Commander Hayes," the general said slowly, "your species has capabilities that we have never encountered. You can survive in conditions that would kill our soldiers, fight with injuries that would incapacitate our troops, and you seem to have no fear of enemies that have terrified the entire galaxy." Hayes nodded. "General, Earth has been trying to kill us for millions of years. We've survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most species. We've also been fighting each other for thousands of years, developing weapons and tactics that most civilized beings would consider barbaric. The Void Swarm may be dangerous, but they're not the most dangerous thing we've ever faced."
"Oh, yes."
Leaders realized that they had discovered something unprecedented, a species that had evolved specifically to excel in the kind of warfare that was needed to defeat the swarm. The humans were not just offering to help. They were offering to do the kind of fighting that the coalition could not do themselves. As the medical examinations and demonstrations continued, one thing became clear to everyone present. The humans were not just allies, they were weapons of war forged by a hostile planet into the perfect soldiers for the galaxy's darkest hour. The planet Xerion 7 hung in space like a poisonous jewel, its surface crackling with electrical storms that could tear apart Coalition ships. For 3 months, the Void Swarm had been using the planet as a forward base, launching attacks that had devastated nearby systems. The Coalition had tried to retake Xerion 7 4 times, losing thousands of soldiers in the process. Now they were going to try again, but this time they had humans. Colonel Dan Brooks stood in the briefing room aboard the Coalition flagship, studying the holographic display of their target. The human officer was tall and lean, with graying hair, and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the tactical situation. Around him sat Coalition commanders from a dozen different species, all wearing environmental suits that made them look like walking machines compared to Brooks' simple military uniform. "The surface conditions are worse than our previous reports indicated," explained Admiral Vorthok, his 6 arms gesturing at the swirling storms on the display. "Atmospheric electrical activity is off the charts. The toxic gases in the lower atmosphere will eat through standard Coalition armor in minutes. Ground temperatures vary from -62 plus 80 degrees Celsius. General Kextel activated additional displays showing the failed assault attempts. 3 Coalition divisions were wiped out in the first attack. The second assault lost 70% of its forces before they could establish a landing zone. Our third and fourth attempts never made it past the orbital defenses." Brooks nodded calmly, making notes on his tablet. "What about the Void Swarm forces on the surface?" "Intelligence estimates at least 50,000 swarm creatures," Admiral Vorthok replied. "They've adapted to the planet's conditions and seem to be using the electrical storms to power their technology. Our energy weapons are useless in that environment. Our soldiers can't survive long enough to use kinetic weapons effectively." Colonel Brooks looked at the data for a few more minutes, then turned to the Coalition commanders. "Gentlemen, I understand your concerns about the surface conditions, but my troops are trained for this kind of environment. We've been fighting in hostile conditions for thousands of years. Xerion 7 is dangerous, but it's not the worst place we've ever had to fight." The Coalition officers exchanged glances. They had seen the human medical reports and training demonstrations, but the idea of soldiers who could actually function in Xerion 7's hellish conditions still seemed impossible. Lieutenant Amy Foster entered the briefing room, followed by her special operations team. Foster was a small woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had survived countless dangerous missions. Her team consisted of 8 soldiers, all equipped with weapons and gear that looked crude compared to Coalition technology. Colonel Foster said, saluting, "Alpha Team is ready for deployment. We've reviewed the planetary data and adjusted our equipment accordingly." Brooks gestured to the Coalition commanders. "Lieutenant Foster will lead the advance team. Her squad specializes in hostile environment operations and has experience fighting in conditions similar to Xerion 7. Admiral Vorthok leaned forward in his environmental suit. "Lieutenant, our best troops couldn't survive more than an hour on that planet's surface. How do you plan to establish a beachhead?" Foster smiled, the same expression that had puzzled and disturbed Coalition observers during the initial contact. "Admiral, my team has operated in Arctic conditions, desert heat, toxic environments, and higher radiation zones. We've fought in places where the air itself was trying to kill us. Xerion 7 looks challenging, but not impossible." The assault began at dawn. Ship time. The Coalition fleet moved into position around Xerion 7, ready to provide orbital support and evacuation if necessary. The human landing craft were simple, blocky vessels that looked like they had been built in a factory rather than designed by engineers. They dropped toward the planet's surface through electrical storms that would have destroyed any Coalition ship. Inside the lead landing craft, Lieutenant Foster checked her equipment one last time. Her team wore armor that seemed almost primitive, metal plates over fabric, with helmets that covered their faces but left their necks exposed. Their weapons were equally basic, rifles that fired metal bullets, explosive grenades, and knives. That would have been museum pieces on most Coalition worlds. 5 minutes to landing, announced Sergeant Chris Martinez, the team's communications specialist. He was a stocky man with dark hair and steady hands, monitoring radio channels that crackled with static from the planet's electrical activity. The storms are getting worse, but we should still be able to maintain contact with the fleet. The landing craft hit the surface hard, its crude shock absorbers doing little to cushion the impact. The humans inside barely noticed the jarring landing that would have injured most Coalition soldiers. Foster opened the hatch and stepped out onto Xerion 7's surface. The planet was even worse than the reports had indicated. The air was thick with toxic gases that would have killed most Coalition species in seconds. Electrical discharges arced across the sky like deadly lightning, and the ground beneath their feet was hot enough to melt standard Coalition equipment. But the humans simply adjusted their breathing masks and began moving toward their objective. Coalition Command, this is Alpha Team, Foster reported over the radio. We have successfully landed and are beginning our advance toward the swarm. Position. Environmental conditions are within acceptable parameters. Admiral Vorthok, monitoring from the flagship, could hardly believe what he was hearing. Acceptable parameters was how the humans described conditions that had killed thousands of Coalition soldiers. He watched through orbital sensors as the human team moved across the planet's surface, their heat signatures barely visible against the superheated ground. The first contact with the Void Swarm came 30 minutes after landing. The creatures appeared without warning, rising from the toxic ground like living shadows. They were nightmare beings, shapeless masses of dark energy that could change form at will. The Coalition's energy weapons had proven useless against them. Their adaptive capabilities made them nearly impossible to fight. But the humans had different ideas about warfare. When the first swarm creature attacked, Sergeant Martinez didn't fire an energy weapon or try to run. Instead, he pulled out a simple explosive grenade, removed the pin, and threw it directly at the creature. The explosion tore through the swarm's energy form, causing it to collapse back into the ground. Kinetic weapons are effective, Foster reported calmly, as if she was discussing the weather rather than the first successful attack on a void swarm creature in months. Explosives work even better, and these things adapt to energy, but they can't adapt to old-fashioned high explosives fast enough. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. The humans fought with weapons that seemed primitive, but were devastatingly effective. They moved through the toxic atmosphere as if it was normal air, coordinated their attacks while under fire from creatures that had terrified entire star systems. And most amazingly, they seemed to become more effective as the fighting intensified. Private Kate Williams, the red-haired soldier who had amazed the Coalition medical team, found herself surrounded by 3 swarm creatures. Instead of calling for help or retreating, she activated 2 explosive charges and held them until the creatures were close enough to be caught in the blast. The explosion should have killed her, but she walked away with only minor injuries. "These humans are insane," whispered General Kexthal, watching the battle through orbital sensors. "They're using tactics that would be considered suicide by any rational species." But the tactics were working. The human team advanced steadily through the swarm defenses, their crude weapons proving more effective than the Coalition's most advanced technology. They moved through environmental conditions that would have killed any other species, fought with injuries that would have incapacitated Coalition soldiers, and showed no fear of enemies that had broken the morale of entire armies. Corporal Lisa Martinez, Chris's younger sister, led a flanking attack that required her team to walk directly through a field of corrosive gas. The gas would have dissolved Coalition armor in seconds. But the humans simply adjusted their breathing equipment and continued their advance. They emerged from the toxic cloud and attacked the swarm position from an unexpected angle. The turning point came when Lieutenant Foster's team reached the swarm's command center. The creatures had established their base in a crater where the electrical storms were strongest, believing that no Coalition force could survive the conditions. But Foster and her soldiers simply endured the constant lightning strikes and fought their way to the center of the swarm position. "Coalition Command, this is Alpha Team," Foster reported, her voice calm despite the explosions and electrical discharges around her. "We have reached the primary objective, beginning demolition of the swarm command structure. The humans placed their explosive charges with the same casual efficiency they had shown throughout the battle. The explosions that followed destroyed the swarm's ability to coordinate their forces, and the creatures began to retreat from the planet's surface. Within 6 hours, the battle was over. News of the human victory at Xerion 7 spread through Coalition space faster than any official report. Within days, every military base, space station, and government facility in the galaxy had access to the battle recordings. The footage showed humans doing the impossible, fighting in conditions that would kill most Coalition species and defeating enemies that had terrorized the galaxy for years. Major Bradley arrived at Coalition Military Academy on the planet Kepler primed to begin training Coalition forces in human combat techniques. Bradley was a veteran soldier with short gray hair and scars on his hands from years of combat experience. He had volunteered for what many considered an impossible mission, teaching alien soldiers to fight like humans. The training facility was massive, designed to accommodate dozens of different species with varying environmental needs. Soldiers filled the main hall, their environmental suits making them look like a collection of walking machines. They represented the best troops from across the galaxy, elite forces who had survived battles against the Void Swarm and lived to tell about it. "Soldiers," Bradley began, his voice amplified by the facility's translation system. "I am here to teach you how humans fight. But I need to be honest with you from the start. Most of what we do cannot be copied by other species. Human combat effectiveness comes from millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill us every day." Lieutenant Colonel Vexram, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes, stepped forward. "Major Bradley, our troops are the finest in the Coalition. We have survived battles that would break lesser soldiers. Surely we can learn your techniques." Bradley nodded respectfully. "Colonel, I have no doubt about your soldiers' courage or skill. But human combat ability is not just about training, it's about biology. Let me show you what I mean." The demonstration began with basic physical fitness. Bradley called forward Sergeant Lisa Davis, a human instructor who had arrived with the training team. Davis was a medium-height woman, with brown hair and muscular build, wearing standard military fatigues that looked simple compared to the Coalition's advanced equipment. "Sergeant Davis will demonstrate basic human exercise routines," Bradley explained. "These are the same exercises that human children perform in school." Davis dropped to the floor and began doing push-ups. The Coalition soldiers watched as she performed movement after movement with mechanical precision. After 50 repetitions, she switched to pull-ups, then to running in place. The alien observers began calculating the physical stress her body was enduring. "Stop," called Dr. Zethkar, the facility's medical officer. "Sergeant Davis has been exercising for 20 minutes without rest. Her heart rate should be dangerously elevated, and her muscles should be approaching failure." Davis barely looked winded.
"Doctor, this is just my warm-up routine."
"I usually exercise for 2 hours every morning before breakfast." The Coalition soldiers exchanged glances. What the human considered a warm-up would have exhausted most of their troops completely. Bradley continued the demonstration with combat training, but quickly discovered that Coalition species simply could not replicate human fighting techniques. "The problem is not courage or determination," Bradley explained to the Coalition commanders later that day. "The problem is that humans evolved differently, can absorb impacts that would shatter alien bones, continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate other species, and our nervous systems allow us to remain calm under stress that would break most minds." Captain Sarah Davis, a strategic planning officer who had arrived from Earth, proposed a different approach. Davis was a tall woman with black hair and sharp eyes who specialized in military logistics and tactics. Weeks studying Coalition forces and developing new strategies that would use human and alien capabilities together. Instead of trying to make Coalition soldiers fight like humans, Davis explained to the assembled commanders, "We should develop tactics that use human forces as shock troops, while Coalition species provide technological support and long-range assistance." General Kextel examined Davis's tactical plans on the main display. The strategy was simple but effective. Human forces would spearhead assaults on the most dangerous Void Swarm positions, places where environmental conditions or enemy resistance made Coalition attacks impossible. Meanwhile, Coalition forces would provide orbital bombardment, electronic warfare, and logistical support from safe distances. Captain Davis, the general asked, "Are you suggesting that human soldiers deliberately seek out the most dangerous combat assignments?" Davis smiled, the expression that continued to puzzle Coalition observers. "General, dangerous combat assignments are what human soldiers train for their entire careers. We don't just accept dangerous missions. We volunteer for them. The more challenging the assignment, the more likely you are to find humans eager to take it on." The new strategy was first tested in the Vega system, where the Void Swarm had established bases on 3 different planets. Each planet presented unique challenges that had defeated previous Coalition attacks. Vega Prime was covered in toxic swamps that corroded equipment and poisoned the air. Vega Secondary had gravitational anomalies that crushed standard vehicles and disoriented troops. Vega Tertiary was bombarded by radiation that would kill most Coalition species and ours. Human forces eagerly accepted assignments to all 3 planets simultaneously. Commander Ryan Hayes led the assault on Vega Prime. Lieutenant Amy Foster took her team to Vega Secondary, and Colonel Dan Brooks coordinated the attack on Vega Tertiary. Each human commander treated their assignment as an interesting challenge rather than a suicide mission. The battles that followed revolutionized Coalition military thinking. On Vega Prime, Hayes and his Marines waded through toxic swamps that would have dissolved Coalition armor, using the poisonous environment to their advantage by forcing swarm creatures into areas where the toxins affected them more than the humans. On Vega Secondary, Foster's team used the gravitational anomalies as weapons, luring swarm forces into areas where the gravity fluctuations would tear the creatures apart. But it was Colonel Brooks' assault on Vega Tertiary that truly shocked the Coalition. The radiation levels on the planet's surface were lethal to most life forms, requiring massive shielding for any Coalition operation. Brooks and his soldiers simply adjusted their equipment and fought in conditions that would have required evacuation. Of any other troops, Dr. Neil Roberts, human engineer who had joined the Coalition forces, revolutionized their military technology by introducing concepts that other species had considered too dangerous to implement. Roberts was a quiet man with thinning hair and steady hands, but his innovations changed how the Coalition fought the war. The problem with Coalition military technology, Roberts explained to a gathering of alien engineers, is that it's designed to keep soldiers safe. Human military technology is designed to help soldiers win, even if that means accepting higher risks. Roberts' first innovation was a series of weapons that were literally too powerful for non-human species to operate safely. The recoil from human rifles would break the bones of most Coalition soldiers. The blast effects from human explosives would injure alien troops who were too close. The operational requirements for human vehicles exceeded the physical capabilities of most other species, but when operated by humans, these weapons proved devastatingly effective against the Void Swarm. Human soldiers could carry weapons that delivered more firepower than Coalition heavy artillery. They could use explosives in close combat situations that would be suicidal for other species. They could pilot vehicles that moved faster and hit harder than anything in the Coalition arsenal. The technological revolution extended beyond weapons. Roberts designed armor that could withstand conditions lethal to most life forms, but that required human strength and endurance to wear effectively. He created communication systems that functioned in environments that would destroy Coalition electronics. Most importantly, he developed vehicles that could operate in the hostile conditions where the Void Swarm had established their strongest positions. The turning point in the war came when Captain Davis developed what became known as the Deathworld doctrine, a comprehensive military strategy that played to humanity's unique strengths. The doctrine recognized that humans could fight effectively in environments and against enemies that were impossible for civilized species to handle. Under the Deathworld doctrine, human forces became the Coalition's primary assault troops for the most dangerous missions. They spearheaded attacks on Void Swarm strongholds, operated in environments that would kill other species, and fought with tactics that other beings considered insane, but that proved remarkably effective coalition. Forces were reorganized to provide technological support, long-range firepower, and logistical assistance to human assault teams. The aliens handled space operations, orbital bombardment, and electronic warfare roles that required advanced technology and careful coordination rather than the brutal close combat that humans excelled at. The new strategy proved so effective that within months, the coalition was winning battles that had been impossible under their previous tactics. The war room aboard the coalition flagship buzzed with activity as commanders from across the galaxy gathered. For the most ambitious military operation in recorded history, General Paul Stevens, the highest-ranking human officer in the coalition. Forces stood before the massive holographic display showing the Void Swarm's primary hive. Stevens was a tall man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. But his voice remained steady as he addressed the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stevens began, "intelligence has confirmed the location of the Void Swarm's central command. It exists in a parallel dimension connected to our reality through dimensional rifts. Every swarm creature we have fought has been controlled from this central hive. If we can destroy it, we end the war." Admiral Vorthok examined the tactical data with his 6 arms moving nervously. "General Stevens, our scientists have analyzed the dimensional readings. The environment in the swarm's home dimension is unlike anything we have encountered. The laws of physics operate differently there. No coalition species could survive more than minutes in that environment." Dr. Lisa Bennett, now serving as the coalition's chief scientific advisor, activated additional displays showing the dimensional analysis. The swarm's home dimension exists in a state of pure entropy. Matter and energy behave in ways that defy understanding. Gravity shifts randomly, time moves at different speeds in different areas, and the very air would dissolve most known materials.
Ow.
Kexthal leaned forward in his environmental suit. "Dr. Bennett, you are describing conditions that would be instantly lethal to any rational life form. How do the swarm creatures survive there?" "They don't survive," Bennett replied. "They are part of that dimension. The swarm creatures we fight in our reality are just projections of entities that exist in a realm where destruction is the natural state of being." Commander Rachel White stepped forward, her face showing the determined expression that had become common among human officers. Off and set up a win-win runner and we're up unbenner and some and more Robertson ready to solve more and wed red on up some that's sweat and the wet at so I dirt up gum or some of devil what just what to which you sit well scars on her hands from close combat with creatures that most species could only fight from a distance. General Stevens White said, "I volunteered to lead the dimensional assault team. We have studied the readings, and while the environment will be challenging, it is not impossible for human forces." The coalition commanders stared at her in disbelief. Challenging was not the word they would have used to describe conditions that would kill most life forms instantly. But the humans had redefined the meaning of impossible so many times during the war that their casual attitude toward deadly environments no longer surprised anyone. Commander White, Admiral Vorthok asked carefully, "How many troops would you need for this mission?" 10,000 volunteers, White replied without hesitation. "The assault will require multiple simultaneous attacks on different parts of the hive structure. We will need teams that can operate independently in an environment where communication may be impossible and retreat is not an option." The request for volunteers was broadcast throughout the human fleet. Within hours, Over 50,000 soldiers had applied for the mission. The selection process was brutal, even by human standards. Only the most experienced combat veterans, soldiers who had survived the worst battles of the war, were chosen for the dimensional assault. Captain Mike Johnson, a Marine officer with brown hair and steady nerves, was selected to lead one of the assault teams. Johnson had fought on 17 different planets during the war, surviving battles that had claimed entire coalition divisions. He treated the dimensional assault as just another mission, though he privately suspected that few of his team would return. "Listen up," Johnson told his Marines as they prepared for the mission. "This is going to be different from anything we have faced before. The environment will be trying to kill us in ways that we cannot predict. Our equipment may stop working, our weapons may not function properly, and we may not be able to communicate with each other once we cross over." Private Kate Williams, now a veteran sergeant with multiple combat decorations, checked her equipment one final time. She had volunteered for every dangerous mission during the war, earning a reputation as someone who could survive anything. "Captain, what are our odds of coming back?" Johnson's honesty was typical of human military culture. "Honestly, Williams, maybe 30%. But if we don't go, the war continues forever. The Coalition cannot fight in that dimension, and the Swarm will keep sending creatures into our reality until every civilized world is destroyed." The dimensional assault began at 0600 hours, ship time. The Coalition fleet positioned itself around the largest dimensional rift, using their most advanced technology to stabilize the portal long enough for the human forces to cross over. The ships themselves could not enter the Swarm's dimension. Only human troops had any chance of surviving the crossing. Commander White led the first wave through the dimensional barrier. The transition was like stepping into a nightmare. The Swarm's home dimension was a realm where the normal rules of reality did not apply. Gravity pointed in multiple directions at once. The ground beneath their feet shifted between solid matter and pure energy, and the sky above them was filled with colors that had no names. "Alpha Team," report White called over her radio. The response came back distorted, as if the sound waves were being twisted by the dimension itself. "This is Johnson. We are through the barrier, but our equipment is behaving strangely. Compass readings are meaningless here, and our GPS systems show impossible coordinates." The assault teams spread out across the alien landscape, following pre-planned routes toward different sections of the swarm hive. The structure was massive, stretching beyond the horizon in directions that seemed to exist outside normal space. It was built from materials that shifted and changed as they watched, creating passages that led to impossible destinations. Sergeant Williams found herself leading her squad through a corridor where the walls were made of crystallized time, showing glimpses of past and future battles. The floor beneath their feet was solid one moment and liquid the next, forcing the soldiers to adapt their movements constantly. But the humans pressed forward, their training and determination allowing them to function in conditions that would have driven most beings insane. The first contact with the swarm's true form came when Captain Johnson's team reached what appeared to be a command center. The creatures they encountered were unlike anything they had fought before, beings of pure malevolent energy that could reshape reality around themselves. These were not the weakened projections that the Coalition had been fighting, but the original entities in their full power. The battle that followed was beyond anything the humans had experienced. Their weapons sometimes worked and sometimes failed, depending on the local reality conditions. Johnson watched one of his Marines fire a grenade that exploded backward in time, destroying a swarm creature before the Marine had actually thrown it. Another soldier's rifle began firing bullets made of condensed starlight that tore through enemies that physical ammunition could not touch. "Command, this is Johnson," he reported during a brief moment when his radio functioned properly. "The enemy is unlike anything we have prepared for. They're not bound by physical laws, but we are making progress. Human determination seems to work even when human technology fails." The assault continued for what felt like days, though time had no meaning in the swarm's dimension. Teams of human soldiers fought their way through chambers where gravity flowed like water, corridors that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and battlefields where the dead could continue fighting because death itself was just another variable, to be manipulated. Commander White's team reached the central core of the hive, a massive structure that seemed to exist in multiple realities at once. The core was protected by the most powerful swarm entities, creatures that had been directing the war from the beginning. The battle was fought with weapons that changed function with each shot and tactics that had to be reinvented moment by moment. All teams, this is White. The commander broadcast on all frequencies. We have reached the primary target, beginning final assault on the core structure. If we succeed here, the war ends. If we fail, no one else will get another chance. The final battle was brutal, even by human standards. The core structure was defended by swarm entities that could alter reality itself, creating weapons and obstacles that should not have been possible. But the humans had one advantage that the swarm had not anticipated. They refused to accept that anything was impossible. Sergeant Williams found herself fighting a creature that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously. She could only see parts of it at any time. But she discovered that her knife could cut through dimensional barriers if she believed hard enough that it would work. Captain Johnson fought enemies that attacked him through his memories, trying to defeat him by changing his past. But his stubborn refusal to accept defeat made their attacks ineffective. The final moment came when Commander White reached the central control nexus. The device that controlled every swarm creature in normal reality was a sphere of crystallized entropy. Surrounded by defenses that existed outside conventional space and time,